Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this year's 2020 plenary of the Capital Region Interfaith Housing Initiative. We are faith communities from all across the city of many different kinds working together to address housing and homelessness. And certainly there's so much work to do. Thank you for coming. As we get started, just a couple things. If you're looking for the bathrooms, they're just to the right when you go out. Okay. You'll notice in the agenda that we do not have a coffee break scheduled. Part of the reason why coffee breaks, bathroom breaks, is if we do it all at the same time, then you get people queuing up, being in close proximity. So we've elected not to have one. So if you would like at any time to use the bathroom or get a cup of coffee or some water in the back, please do so. All right? What? Oh, and Audrey is the coffee person, so she will serve you. So that's one way we try to restrict all those common spaces. So, I'd like to at this point invite our elder for today, Tom Snow, and he's going to greet us.
Ambawastit Plenary Ani Oki Tanse. Well, there's at least five of them. Those are the readings of the people that came here. But the signatories to the treaty, at the time of treaty here, was the Nakota, the Niheo, which are known as Cree, the Soto, I think they're also known as Ojibwe, and the Dene. And I think they may have been referred to as Ojibwe, or Dogger, or something like that, but those were the signatories to Treaty 6 on which lands that we are on. And I just thought I'd like to acknowledge that and to welcome you. Those words that I said were greetings when you meet somebody. In our case, I'm Nakota Sioux, a member of one of the signatories, and we say Ambawastit. So that says it is a good day. So it wasn't a comment on the weather. It was another day of life that we're in gratitude of. So that's what's our greeting. The other ones I'm not sure. Anyway, I'd just like to start off with a prayer, and is like Michael was talking about this housing situation, and I can really see that. And it is a difficult situation, challenging, and so I'll have that in my prayer. But my prayer is all in my language. Yeah. Hai no kantanga. Akenagaha amadon was thing where could name so ha. The chinging of all I know, then looking at the teaching loyalties comes then our sungia the holding of my head the house, then our June chapter. In looking at donor here, which ya John Jogi one. That's I look at him, Chiawang Sims. Looking at the up in the thought you must have the house. Get your arms in luck. Nago in no eddy get your bones. I saw donor, then ye are behind dog. Nangu the house in no touch on his wapi bicha. Uchakuna in no read the hand, down pincha daskara. Nangu down would not see in Taya bicha winter. In no getting the average lay the house. Woke Jummy was the stay high hibona. So woke some days cooked the eye in Kabicha. I know that's a Okarabi. Yani nebiga son pekton Sunday, se winza. Ihno ingin giabit sing gamis. Ihno den nangut narin ne so tangay inap John. Somos niche hamis ye chagya ho in times. Dukinar seus ogo planim jab ke chagya hami hatuk. He chagya wa ichisim jewan. Isnies pinamats hai.
My name is Reverend Audrey Brooks. I'm the chaplain at the Unitarian Church of Edmonton. Is this on? Okay, sorry. My name is Reverend Audrey Brooks. I'm the chaplain at the Unitarian Church of Edmonton and a member of the Interfaith Housing Initiative. I have a reflection for us this morning. This is what we do with our faith. We bring compassion to all our endeavors. We stand for truth and justice in our communities. We join with others who believe in these things. Most of all, we reach out to the world around us, knowing we have love that encompasses everyone, understanding that if we do not put action into words, we cannot reach out to our sisters and brothers. We who feed the hungry hold each person as sacred. We walk with First Nations, house those in need, see jobs that need doing and do them. We know in our hearts the meaning of family. This is what we do with our faith. This is what we do. Amen.
Okay, all right, well we got a fair bit to cover this morning. We want to make sure we guard our time for some of the reports that we have, some of the questions that you have, and for some table conversations at the end. So what I'd like to start with right now is provide an update on the work that we have been doing together as Interfaith Housing over the last year. And there's a lot to cover, so forgive me for going a little fast. But if you'd like to follow along, the report is on your tables in front of you, and I've tried to condense things to keep it brief and clear. All right? So if you can give us our next slide, Claire.
Are you doing the report or the PowerPoint?
Report. Well, and the report is the PowerPoint. You can use the PowerPoint, attach the report, maybe put it in the Zoom. Well, let me get started as best I can. So we as Interfaith Housing, we started in 2011, and I had a picture of that initial signing of a declaration, joint statement that said that housing and homelessness matters to all of us, and that we stand together as in support of city and provincial efforts for all and call upon all levels of government to assist in the work, and that we were here too, and we want to help. We back as part of our common interfaith statement, we say that we value inclusive, diverse, welcoming communities where every person can thrive. Okay, here we are. So there's the picture, and there's our a little clip of our statement. It points to the common values. we can work together, because we may believe very different things about the world, our role in it, who God is, but when it comes down to welcoming, caring communities, this is something we all care deeply about, and that's common ground for us to work on. You can give us our next slide. Here's one of the troubling statistics that sadly has not changed very much. Today, 1 in 4 Edmontonians have a hard time affording homes, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on a place to live, with more than 21,000 households as of last year spending over 50% on housing. And that's over 50%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%. It's very, very difficult, and it causes all kinds of problems for families. Next slide. So how are we doing our work together? We have, we have our steering committee that oversees the larger direction and work of our movement. We have our education and advocacy committee, which organizes events, oversees our advocacy efforts in education. And we have our one staff person, me, Mike Van Boom, as our network animator. And so I serve full-time as support in all the work that we do. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the areas of work we decided to embark on together last year was to invest in local area networks, that we thought building relationship in local areas between different faith communities and helping them work together in the local context was something that we thought would be really, really helpful. So we began doing some work together on that in Capilano, Strathcona, Mill Woods, Riverbend to Williger, and Greenfield South. I will say the work has gone slower than we would like, but we have begun doing have been at tables in at least the top 3 areas. And then on the bottom we are, so Riverbend to Williger and Greenfield South, we were working on doing a poverty simulation as a way to bring people together around a project, something that was important, as those communities don't have a lot of experience with affordable housing, and maybe need some help getting there, thinking through it a little bit, and that was a way to get everybody working together. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and we've had to put that on the sidelines, but we hope to resume that again when we are able to do so. Next slide. One of our things that we've been trying to do is help faith communities that have land to think about redeveloping and building with some affordable or supportive housing. So we've had some great examples of this in Edmonton. So Westmount Presbyterian Church is a story we've been telling for a few years now, because they've had a very, very successful and beautiful project, and was even well received into the community, not without some challenges, but they did their consultation very, very well. But so we have 4 different communities we're talking to right now. So Old Strathcona Baptist Church, River West Christian Church, Edmonton Moravian Church, and we have matched them with Métis Capital Housing, River West with Jasper Place, and Mount Carmel Bible College, where we're just trying to get the initial conversation started. So, but they have a piece of land attached as well. Okay, next slide, please. Last November, we hosted a public conversation on harm reduction and advocacy and abstinence. What we were seeing was that there was, say, a polarization of people around 2 different perspectives, and we saw governments, like provincial parties, say, were an example of that. They too had some of that polarization, and what that meant on the ground was that when you had one government party coming in, that you'd have a pendulum swing towards one, and then it would swing back when another group came in. And so coming to a common understanding, a shared understanding of how this work of treating addictions works, and the effectiveness of both types of programs, how they work, how they both support the work of an addict towards healing, we thought was critical to get out there. Because we were even seeing an emphasis on harm reduction in in Edmonton, but then a shortage of abstinence-based approaches, especially in supportive housing. And for people that are at a different stage of their journey where they are trying to stay clean, they don't want to be in a harm reduction facility. And so one of the reasons we hosted this conversation, and if you'd like to read the full report and see the videos of the presentations, it's all on our website, and please do that. Next slide, please. Our new baby. In November of 2019, we completed a new project that we had been working on for about 2 years, called Togetherwise. So what we did was we were seeing that how the consultation was done made a big impact in whether affordable or supportive housing was welcomed or opposed. And that if they did it really, really well, it succeeded in building relationships with the local community. It helped resolve a lot of the concerns and fears and worries, and it even helped, you could see the benefits of that good relationship taking place afterwards. And so we hosted a development project. We made it a collaborative design. So we had housing providers, we had community leaders and faith leaders all working together in building this new approach to doing consultation. And it's a program that we are offering now in the Edmonton context. If you want to learn more about it, I've got some of the Togetherwise resource guides are in the back. I'm happy to chat with you afterwards about it, but it's a unique way of doing consultation, and a major piece of it is we give a planning guide that allows both the community and the developer to make the plan together, so that they know this is how our community talks, these are the active groups we should connect with, here's how to do it, here's what we agree to do in hosting information, right? To make that plan that builds relationship, shows excellence and trust, builds trust in the community. Next slide, please. We can celebrate a few wonderful things on the advocacy side. I think the City of Edmonton we are really grateful that we have a City Council that is passionate, committed, and invested in affordable and supportive housing. It's not everybody does that. Our City Council is passionate about it, and they put their money where their mouth is. One of the things that we say is a bit of a victory for us. We've been asking that the city would intentionally look at a distributed network of affordable and supportive housing, rather than have just a few communities become the place where we build new things, to say every community needs to make room for people, and that affordable and supportive housing should be in every part of the city. And so last year, the city formally said 16% is the goal in every community, and that was really, really great news. The city has also backed 4 new permanent supportive housing units, and they're moving forward. They're doing most of the funding of that as well. They haven't, so they're really behind it. Terrace Heights, King Edward Park, MacArthur Industrial, and Inglewood. And so we're very excited about those and passionate about and wanting to support those. If you have members or people that live in those communities, please encourage them to participate in the consultation that's underway, because it's very important. The city is also laying groundwork for some bridge housing to help people that are waiting for affordable or supportive options. So they're passionate about it. I mean, you'll hear the mayor, he's up there talking about it quite often, and so we're very grateful for that. Next slide, please. With the province of Alberta, we were grateful to see a new affordable housing project announced recently, working with the Métis Capital Housing. I think that's really, really good news. Good to see that they are involved and working on it. Some of the funding has been committed previously, so we're trying to get to make this a point of passion and commitment as well for the province. So we did have a few concerns. We see there are continuing investments, but the budget released prior to COVID-19 announced cuts to the rent assistance program. And it's also difficult to track with the current commitments what's going to be towards permanent supportive housing, which is that help for with people who've had chronic addictions and been on the streets for years. Right? They need the stronger level of supports. It's not clear where the provincial investments, if they're going to be coming to the table on that. And so that's one of the things we want to talk to them about are those two things. And so the Archbishop has extended an invitation on our behalf. And so we have a small group of us just for a conversation with the province. And rent assistance, permanent supportive housing, and encouraging the government's role in providing housing are the 3 points that we're going to talk to them about. Next slide, please. Last time we also mentioned that we were starting a Jubilee mortgage. We want to explore the possibility of having a 0% mortgage program and what it would look like and how could it be built, how could it be structured. We did a draft of that. I'm happy to share that with you if you'd like. You can drop me an email. But we have a committee that's actively talking together about it and also exploring some related issues, because there are other ways to help people into affordable home ownership. And so we're exploring those as well. Next slide, please. This is a new project that we're working on right now. We have, when COVID hit, it certainly impacted our work too, and what we were able to do, and also the kinds of things we were able to get funding for. So we came forward with an idea that to help low-income, Indigenous, and newcomer families connect locally was a good way to contact to help combat isolation, which is a big thing. We've got a lot of families that a big family, and they're stuck in their house all day long, afraid to go out, maybe language barriers, or there's barriers to building relationships with your neighbors that, and they can include racism. But when you're living in poverty yourself, you might not feel that you have a lot of energy for it. You may also feel that you're being judged by your neighbors as well. And so we have started a project called Neighbors Helping Neighbors. We're going to be providing resources to encourage the common call to community, the value of community that every culture under the sun says this is important. We need to care for each other, we need to watch out for each other, we need to be connected with each other, and then some ideas and resources on how to do that. And we're going to be presenting these in 10 different languages, so to 10 different cultural communities. So it's a lot of work. One of the things you can help us with, we are on the hunt for cultural communicators. On the report there, it'll say which ones we're still looking for. So we have a Cree language cultural communicator now. We have a French African cultural communicator. We're looking for a few more. So if you can help us with that, that'll be great. Next slide, please. And Welcome Home has been a project that we helped get started early on. And just a brief report that in the past year, Welcome Home served 64 participants, 134 volunteers, and 94% of our participants maintained their housing. Now, Welcome Home is meant to help combat loneliness and isolation. For someone coming off the street into housing, one of the biggest reasons people would fail is loneliness. They don't know anybody, their friends are back on the street. It's a good reason to walk away, right? So we pair up a couple volunteers for at least a year to meet them, to connect with them weekly, and go for coffee, go for walks, do those kinds of social things. And it's really been very helpful to the people. It's helping them succeed. Next slide, please. And just a quick update on Interfaith Habitat Works. We've been doing this every year since we started as well. And in 2019, we had our best turnout ever. We had over 300 volunteers. It was a really, really successful event. COVID-19 has put a little bit of damper on the plans, so it is suspended until we're able to do that kind of volunteering again. But we're grateful for that continuing partnership. Next slide. So that's kind of our report. So you have it in front of you as well. Does anybody have any questions for us as Interfaith? For me or for the steering committee? Yeah, Audrey?
I'd like to know how many people have been housed through the programs.
How many people have been housed through the programs? Which ones?
Through the ones that we've been involved with, the Interfaith group.
So we don't directly house people ourselves, so we certainly are a voice of support. So I want to say that we've been advocating for permanent supportive housing investments by the city for years. And so with these 4 new investments, I believe there's about 100 spaces, and maybe a little bit more. And certainly we have, if we see some of our church communities or faith communities redevelop land that we've helped talk them through that, we hope to see some more possibilities coming out of there as well. So, yeah, Ned.
The city's been talking about buying up hotels. Well, during COVID, hotels spaces are empty and using that for housing. Is that going ahead, do you think?
So the city, Ned asked, the city is looking to purchase some hotels in order to use for at least housing in this time of crisis for the homeless. I'm hopeful that it will. I think it's the federal government, I believe they had some announcements of funding towards that. It looks like that may go ahead one way or another. I think the province is also in conversation with them too. So, Quinn.
This may have partially answered the question, I don't know, but can you say more about bridge housing between, for people waiting that are on waiting lists?
So,
Can you summarize?
okay, so can I say more about bridge housing and what it is and how it works? So the city has been focused on rapid rehousing. And so they want to get people off the street as soon as possible. If you fall out of your housing, being on the street even for 2 weeks can be a damaging experience, hard to claw back from. So they try to get people back into housing as quickly as possible. Often there are some waiting lists or there's some delay in getting you into a place. And so they don't want people to be out on the street or in the shelters for a whole month while they're waiting to get into something. So it's meant to just be a short term, a month or something like that. But that's sort of how they're trying to do, as a way to get people off the street as quickly as possible, and so that they are ready to move into the next stage.
So, but what do they look like? Are we talking hotel rooms or?
That's a more detailed question than I might be able to answer. Sir, I think they might have some on-site supports, so 24-hour on-site people, but it may just be a refurbished hotel room. It could be. I'm not sure.
Question from here: is the Welcome Home program still running during COVID, and are they accepting new volunteers?
Is the Welcome Home program still running, and are they accepting new volunteers? Claire, do you want to speak to that quickly?
I don't know if I'll be loud enough for the
Probably not. Maybe just come up quick.
Hi, so the answer is yes. We are still operating during the COVID pandemic. Initially, of course, we had to lock down along with everyone else. Since then, our matches have been meeting primarily outdoors. We're currently finalizing our cold weather protocols so that everyone will be able to continue to socialize during the winter. And in the next few weeks and months, we will be possibly looking at recruiting more volunteers. So that's a yes.
Oh, one more question.
Having visited the tent camp with approximately 300 formerly homeless people living together, it seems very well organized. It feels like they're experiencing community and safety that was lacking on the street. And I'm very fearful that they will suddenly be dispersed and sent out into the community where resources are scarce. What is the role of the Interfaith Housing Council in supporting or advising the city?
So I think our focus always has been on affordable and supportive housing. So we want to have people off the street as well. So like we're encouraging the building of more long-term solutions, right? So we're not focused on shelters, and that's part of why we've been a little bit more quiet on Tent City as well, because we're asking for the same sorts of things that they have, right? Affordable, supportive housing, and the city is doing that work, and we're grateful for it. But we're always encouraging them to, right? So these are certainly our voices say coming from another direction, but it's pointed in the same way.
Are you advising a gradual transition to housing in lieu of someday them coming in with a dumpster and bulldozers?
I don't think we're advocating for anything in particular on that. So I think the city's trying to be very careful. I think with the Pekewiwin tent site, it seems like they are they're not in a hurry at all, right? They really want to help transition things in a good way. When winter comes, right? And I think that's part of where the mayor's request for purchasing motels and stuff is part of it. So, yeah.
You said something about the provincial government cutting funds.
So the provincial government cut funds from rent assistance, and they were scaling back the program. Now this was really distressing because we know that the rent assistance program is helping some of those people who are on the very edge, like that 21,000 families that are paying more than 50% of their income to rent. This was going to those folks, and so it didn't seem like a lot of savings. They were cutting back, and that's part of why we really want to talk to the province. All right, good. Well, I'm not hearing any more questions. So, Kathy, perhaps you can come up, and we have a few asks from the steering committee. And so Kathy will talk through that with you. There is a second sheet of paper that you had with the steering committee asks, so if you can have that in front of you.
Mike gave me, when I made it my print size, which is larger than it used to be when I was younger, like 4 pages, and I know you're able to read.
You have to hold it like that.
Okay, that's better. I was just saying Mike gave me 4 pages when it was my print size, which is larger than it used to be a few years ago. And I looked at it and I thought I'm going to pick out some highlights. So He gave you probably one of a similar sheet, but he gave me a couple of them. One of them referring to reflecting our work together, and the other is the ask. I'd like to pick up a few of the things from reflecting our life together. We've been at this now for some time. Someone said to me, there's been more than 100 people housed, and of course, there's been thousands over that period of time. Probably, I think at one point I heard in excess of 8,000. We don't actually house them ourselves, but we participate in helping that to happen. And through Welcome Home, we participate in keeping them in their homes, which is equally important. We have continued the last few years to keep up with the workshops. Workshops are one of the ways we can actually spend some time in a community and help them get to know each other, and at the same time give them a lot of information. And we found that to be actually very effective. A few years ago, when there was going to be a big push, we did not know it at the time, but there was going to be a big push back in the Capilano area. People were not happy that zoning was changing. And we had a workshop just before then with a really good turnout, and we found out, listening to the news, that many people were pushing back with our talking points. And some of them had been there, and some of them had just talked to other people. We know what we do is effective. Mike's already talked about it, but I'm going to point you back once again to the Together Wise table. If you take nothing else away, make sure you take away some information about that. We know it's important that when consultation happens in a community, that it not be just a checkbox to be checked off. You just get a lot of people ticked off if you do that. And so Together Wise helps both the community and the developer have a real conversation. Being really clear about what they have some say about and what they don't, so that together they can make it a good experience, particularly for the people moving in. We continue to provide a lot of volunteer opportunities. Right now, one of the asks from the steering committee is we are always looking for members. Currently, we have members from, I think we have it here. Currently, we have members from the Muslim, Jewish, Sikh, Unitarian, Roman Catholic, Anglican, Christian Reform, and Lutherans. What we don't have is several other groups that have been there previously. Some of them we are in conversation with. If you represent one of those, we are looking at you, or perhaps you can think of someone more appropriate. The more people we have at the table, the better the conversations are. We need a few more members. We are also looking for help with one of our projects that Mike talked about. You'll see there the names of languages that are being particularly sought after. It's not just that the person needs to speak it, there's a whole culture that goes along with that language. And it's important we get that right. We continue to advocate with all three levels of government. Sometimes we've had particular events that make those happen. About a year ago, we had the one on abstinence. The year prior to that, we actually brought three levels of government together to talk about, with each other and with people with lived experience, what the homeless situation was here and needed to be addressed. Here, the greater Edmonton area, but we're always aware that there are problems throughout this province. And so having people there from the province, having people there when possible federally, keeps those conversations live. And we have the delight of seeing them talk to each other face to face, which I don't think is something they usually do a lot of in collaborative conversations. So when we can do those things, it is a good experience for us, and I think it is a good experience for others. We have been providing a great many resources for people through our website and through the newsletter. It is something to point out to others when they are looking for resources. And there's a possibility always of communicating with Mike, who puts that together, so that there may be questions people have that we haven't thought of. In the last year, we made sure the free tax clinics continued, or we participated in making sure those happened. One of the things with COVID-19 happening is the regular spots that people could have gone for tax help closed. Often the building itself closed. So finding ways of helping with that was very important. Personally, I continue to be excited that we haven't given up on the Jubilee mortgage program. I'm not exactly sure where it's all going to land eventually, but I do know that help is needed. The concern that we have for housing for those who rent becomes escalated when people are not able to purchase homes. One of the fears we have going ahead is people who currently have homes that they have under mortgage may be going underwater, and more will be said of that later on this morning. I'm trying not to repeat too much. I think we've got most of it. The last part is giving in general. In the past, we've been able to count on a significant portion of our costs, which are minimal. We can do a lot with $70,000 a year. But we've counted on our partners in the city to help us. And I don't think there's a lack of desire to do that now. But if you look at the news, you know how many people they've had to lay off. So we know if they're able to help at all this year, it is going to be minimal. That means we need to step up more to help. We're in the process right now of applying for a grant that will be part of the Together Wise process that could come in with about half of our salary component for the next 2 years. That's still an if, but it is a real possibility. The other half has to come from us. We have had a lot of generosity from our members. We continue to get office space, etc., from the Anglican Diocese, for which we are very grateful, because that would be a significant cost if that was not available to us. And we have some that have had us on their budget, and we're asking they continue to do that. And if you haven't, consider it even in a small way. We know churches and other faith communities have been hit by COVID-19 in terms of their own incomes. But unlike many of them, we're not necessarily going to be able to get the salary supports. I know within my denomination, the salary supports from the federal government have made it possible for us to continue to pay pastors and office administrators. That does not necessarily happen to the kind of organization we have. We're charitable, but we don't fit the criteria. So that's something that needs to be considered, and we are definitely looking for your help. Do they have on their sheet how to do this?
Yes.
Okay, for those of you who are in the distance, let me point out the primary thing you need to remember if you are going to help with this very important program that we're working on. The way to help is basically through the Edmonton Anglican Diocese. So you can do that online, you can do that by check. If you have a question, you can get in touch with Mike and he will tell you how to. We need that. And this is how to do it. Don't feel embarrassed that your amount isn't a lot. A lot of moderate amounts add up. Okay, and I think I'm going to leave it at that. I think everything else you've touched on already, Mike. If you have any questions, you can also get in touch with me. My name is Kathy Schmidtke. I'm a pastor at the Lutheran Church, a part of the ELCIC in this here. I'm an interim pastor, so I have a little bit more time these days. And I think I'll leave it like that. Oh, I should say, anybody have any questions from the things that I have brought up? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. We are, I don't know if you're watching or looking at your schedule, but we are doing really well for time, which is great. So I think, let's see what time we got right now. We're about 20 minutes early, so that's good. Hey, woohoo! If you wanna stand up and stretch your legs for a little bit, maybe we'll just take a few minutes to do that now. And then we're going to hear a few presenters to talk about COVID crisis and some of the impacts we're seeing. So.
There's a dozen. A dozen? Oh, well.
table's worth right there. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'll tell Mike. Yeah. I was trying not to move stuff around.
The mic is pretty sensitive. But it is picking up.
Were you listening to it?
Yeah, I jumped in on our phone.
Pretty well, everyone could work from home.
Is there anything we can do to change it now or not?
What's that?
Do you think we can try it now or not?
The sound? Yeah. What it basically needs is an interface. So it's like a separate sound card that you plug in, and we have a few now, but one works differently than another.
Yeah, a couple people.
One of our pastors in his office down there, he's been texting me a little bit. Honestly, I thought it sounded pretty good when I took my head into his office because you can hear what I have to say. And it's just like a big gym sound with all of the ending sounds. But it's not bad. We can leave the waves up there and oh, for when you speak.
No, for when I speak as well.
Oh. Mike, are you able to manage that? Are you speaking next?
Yeah, I'll probably.
text so I can read it? Either, or others, either that or I have to hold it.
I don't know if we can sort of point them.
So I got the email from the and I was like, are there's so many changes in my site here.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Is somebody going to be doing this?
I will at the end.
Okay, so
Got it.
because I don't want to walk off. Okay. Well, that's a big deal for them. I too.
Well, she was only 8, right? So.
She was a Canny, I was a Canny. So our dads actually grew up in the same
I think she got on now.
Oh, but she's on there. She'll need
The presenter? Doing this?
Yeah, so she's going to come in on my machine. So I'll just send her that the Zoom meeting is not live yet for her to come in there, but she can, I'll just email her. It's clear to me. So because she's presenting, we need her on that side. Right, so that's coming from my. So I have a Zoom link that gave her when that Zoom link is active, then she can join. And then she'll be up on the screen. I'll just email her real quick.
Do you want me to? I can message her here, she's on here. Or do you want to talk to her, Mike? You can come just talk to her.
I mean, I still get tons of calls. Especially. Because I was also I still have some of the stuff in my office. So they'll actually be commissioned in the same way.
Don't we have something that just, they have to work hard? Just went in.
Just merged in.
Oh, okay. Why? Make that,
Yeah, so they just went in. And the kids.
well, yeah. As a parent with their children, it's the perfect way.
That's perfect. You don't have to follow.
Let's get a little hurt.
Yeah, or be just
You just gotta go base on the 3 pound over.
yeah, well, that's tough.
Hello everyone, we're going to resume again, and so the next three presentations we're going to hear are talking about the COVID crisis and its impact on different areas of the city and people that are needing help. So for our first presenter, I would like to invite up the Raging Grannies, and they're going to, I'll let them share what they're going to say.
I find this too restricting too. Well, this is on, right? Okay. So this is the Raging Granny's perspective on seniors' care. When we seniors enter our so-called final interlude of our lives, dramatic changes can happen for which neither our families or we are quite prepared. I know I didn't realize I was getting old till I hit my 79th year. I was diagnosed with macular degeneration, and this is why we were fooling around with lights and things here. And I didn't think that would happen within 6 months of me reaching 79. So I'm starting to, as a friend of mine who is English says, slide down the curtains. Yes. My grandson said to me, "Grandma, stand straight." And I went and looked in the mirror and I realized that I'm getting that little grandmother stoop that Carol Burnett did so well on her TV shows. I don't think any of us believe that we're going to get old. I know when I was younger, I thought, well, there were young people and middle-aged and old, and everybody stayed there. But that really isn't the case. It creeps up on us all of a sudden, and we wake up and, as they say, we smell the coffee. I can tell you that the COVID-19 virus gave us a wake-up call. So we've talked about this. We heard about the Army being called in to relieve the staff of certain care homes in one of the provinces, and the report they gave was a little scary, that seniors were not being very well cared for. And we thought we'd better talk about something like this at the plenary. That could have been us. It could have been anyone who is a senior. When we think of the people who are homeless, we must also talk about the kind of housing we provide for them as well as for our seniors. A reality that we have to face is our communities are facing the fact that many of the people who are living on the streets or in our valleys, anywhere in the city or the province, fall into the seniors category. I'm going to invite Rosemary Falconer, who is a member of the Raging Grannies and also a member of the Welcome Home volunteer service, to come up and put her 2 cents in. Rosemary. We have to do this.
Okay. Hi, my name is Rosemary. About 5 years ago, I became a member of the Edmonton Raging Grannies. You don't have to be left-wing to be a granny, you just have to believe in social issues. Our message may be political, but we are not partisan. We don't have to worry about losing our jobs. Most of us are older women who have lived a variety of lives with all the ups and downs that most people face. We are mothers, grannies, and great-grands, or not, it's not compulsory. At this time of both environment and health crises, we take advantage of every opportunity to be present at rallies and marches. The voices of the people must be heard in the streets and from the voting booths. In terms of seniors' care, our attention is drawn to the gaps between haves and the have-nots in the way seniors' care is offered. If you are homeless, even getting an old age pension when you turn 65 is difficult. You need a home address and a phone number, and where do you get that? Some of the shelters may offer their services and their addresses to help you with that. But if you lose your ID, or you haven't done income tax for years, have no birth certificate, you can imagine how hard it is to jump through the hoops. E4C is one of the organizations that has a Make Tax Time service that does income taxes over the phone. But few challenged seniors can even follow through on this. If they can, taxes must be filed every year, or the pension stops. Many homeless seniors no longer have the capacity to do all of this, and they struggle to live on the street until they die there, from cold, from neglect, from refusing care. Homeless seniors are like all homeless people. They are both a visible light for some passers-by and are invisible to many who do not see them as useful.
Thank you, Rosemary. And I'd like to invite Marilyn Gay to come up. Marilyn Gay is a raging granny and a political activist, and everywhere there's a rally, there's Marilyn.
Do I wipe it again? Strange new etiquette.
This is the new Holy Grail.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And to add to my resume, I'm also recently a great-grandmother. My name is Marilyn Gay. When we look at how long-term care is provided for seniors in Canada, we see a complicated delivery of services. We have a tendency to house residents in high-density facilities with shared bathrooms and only curtains separating the beds. Since seniors have diverse cultural and health-related needs, these crowded facilities do not promote a safe and stress-free experience for those seniors. Overworked and stressed caregivers are in daily contact with many residents in an assembly line of required brushed tasks. Seniors with multiple needs who, for lack of space, cannot be isolated from others create conditions that are ideal for a viral invasion of the facility, which we have seen play out. Whether it is a privately run or a not-for-profit public institution, cost is a major factor in providing even a basic level of care. The current pandemic certainly has brought out this to our attention, with the highest number of deaths occurring in long-term care homes. What a tragedy. The Raging Grannies have a big wish list when it comes to improving long-term care. A friend told me that when her mother, who had physical but not mental problems, was not having her needs met, the administrator of the senior's home told her if they kept complaining about her mother's care,
he would put her in a wheelchair outside the building and they could just take her somewhere else. Other family members who were complainers or advocates for their loved one have been banned from visiting because, as a punishment or as a way of hiding the ugly facts. The mother of another colleague was in one of the best care facilities, her own room, her own bathroom, good medical care, and excellent food. What a contrast in care. We seniors deserve equality of care, just like any other Canadian citizen. For some to be shunted into tiny little booths and others given a humane and comfortable residence is a representation of inequality. Part of the wish Raging Grannies have is to include long-term seniors care under the Public Health Care Act, where it should have been from the beginning. Under the Act, there would be an enforced national strategy to eliminate the present patchwork of services across provinces and territories. We can do this. We must demand it.
Oh, I hope nothing broke.
That was emphatic, wasn't it? Well, so we're going to demonstrate to you what the Raging Grannies do best, and that's what we do is sing. We've given you our platform of our wants and our descriptions of things that go on for seniors. And as you can see that, I think most of us are all seniors. I have 13 grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Grandchildren and 13 great-grandchildren. I just had my first great-great-grandchild. So we qualify, I think, most of us, to be able to speak on this topic today. Okay, here we go. We'll just get this out of the way and you can maybe come forward here. Are we spaced properly? Who needs to move? Sylvia, step forward. Marilyn is our Marilyn is the border collie of the group. Okay. Ready? Okay. All I want is a home somewhere far away from the cold night air, with some love and special care. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Some might think that it's kind of neat to panhandle on the street. Believe me, it's no treat, it's anything but lovely. Oh, for a room where I could shower and be alone. Maybe even have a door that I could close. No virus there to attack me. With my dignity, I feel so free. The future just might be not so scary. It could be so lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you.
Just hold on. So we have. So we're just going to take a quick break between presentations right now. We have some gift of food and snacks from as a contribution from the Muslim community, and we're very grateful for it. So. All right, so for our next presenter, we're trying to, Susan McGee is here from Homer Trust, and she's going to talk a little bit about housing ahead of us. Maybe we can do a quick sound check, Susan. Can we hear you? Susan, yeah, can we just do a quick sound check to see if we've got you, if we can hear you?
Sure, I'm talking right now. Can you hear me?
We can, we're all good. Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah, well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, if you'd like to share a little bit about what Homer Trust sees as far as looming housing challenges, that would be wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been. I've just been able to join recently. I've had some of the meetings this morning, so I'm sorry that I can't be there in person. Congratulations on you being able to convene in this environment. I think it's always a challenge and something that certainly requires a lot of planning and pre-planning and preparation. So my hat's off to everybody that has made this happen. I'm on the call, and there may be a couple of detailed questions that we may shift into some questions, and Gary Plaganda, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, is also in the meeting, and I may tap on him a little bit for some specific information, because we are pretty data oriented and we've got lots of numbers and they change every day. But I also am going to assume that most in the room know who Homer Trust is and have a bit of a background, so I won't get into that. But just for the really quickly, just as a nonprofit organization, Homer Trust has been mandated to lead our communities-based efforts to end homelessness, and in that means lots of partnerships, including partnering with the Interfaith community, as well as many agencies that serve homeless community members in a variety of ways, but specifically around our Housing First program. And we are a funder of many of those activities, and we've been more recently developing housing supportive housing and bridge housing. So there may be some kind of updates that people are interested around that, but in terms of where we're at today and living pressures, particularly what I'm sure everybody is seeing right now in the media, throughout the pandemic, I must say that the community responded really, really quickly and collaboratively to stand up the expo and to try to create the safest environment possible. And at that time, I think we were all really not sure what was around the corner, so we planned accordingly. We anticipated the potential of scaling much more than we actually ended up having to, but also were in a position of readiness as a community. We saw public spaces closing, and particularly the services that people rely on during the day and the access to spaces that we all, I think have realized that we sometimes take for granted, like libraries and private public spaces, all of those things shifted incredibly quickly. So the community really responded to that, and in that time, we continued to house. So the Housing First program, which we have a dozen community organizations that we contract with and that we work directly with to do the Housing First work, and have consistently been housing about 120 to 140 people per month pre-pandemic, have really sustained those efforts. So in a really phenomenal, really Herculean effort, we've continued to provide permanent housing to people, working directly out of Expo for the months that it was open, and now in a little bit more of a pop-up, if you will, to use kind of a current vernacular approach to providing coordinated access to various sites, including one of the current encampments in our city. So that's been ongoing, and you might ask yourself, with all of those positive efforts, why we are seeing an increase and what those pressures are. And there's no doubt that the pandemic has put many Edmontonians at a risk of losing their housing. Some of whom have never experienced homelessness before, and trying to navigate a system at the time when the system has completely kind of been put on its head in terms of normal approaches to accessing and getting answers to questions. We have housing organizations that no longer have their housing, their public-facing offices open. It's a different environment to navigate. Some of that's been probably also, where we can learn and maybe innovate and be more efficient and effective, but it's definitely been a disruption. So we've had individuals impacted significantly by the change in our economy, relying very, importantly on the SERB funding that the federal government announced very early in the pandemic. And also, the environment that was created around mitigating evictions that allowed some time to ensure that people did not immediately lose their housing due to non-payment of rent. So lots of those early steps we are seeing right now either canceled, so the policy around eviction mitigation was lifted in mid-August, and so we're looking to the reality that some people will be evicted and lose their housing. Some operators in the province, and you might have seen some of the media that came out of the Calgary Housing Company, evicting 500 of their residents, not certainly because they want to. I mean, I think it's a really, really challenging situation for everyone, but we are in a bit of a constellation of a lot of pressures. So it's no one issue, and with that, obviously no one solution. Homer Trust has been very fortunate to receive some additional funding on behalf of our community, which we've been able to direct to initially the Expo, both federal and Government of Alberta funding. We've also been able to increase somewhat some of our housing efforts. We've established new partnerships with First Nations in the surrounding area of Edmonton, as well as more supportive referrals. And a supportive referral space maybe needs a little bit of explanation from me, because I think we've become very familiar with the Housing First program. But supportive referrals are where we establish a relationship with an organization that supports individuals, vulnerable Edmontonians, that may be losing their housing but don't actually necessarily require the commitment of a follow-up support staff member from our Housing First agencies. They are being supported by an organization that has programs in place, and so those partnerships have been really important in providing some very short-term financial support to damage deposits and providing first month's rent, access to furniture, and we established a process of accessing kits early on, to support people and given a lot of flexibility to agencies to determine what's important in those kits, depending on who they're serving, and that, whether it's food or supplies or other things. So, trying to be as flexible as possible and establish new relationships, because we could see the emerging issues and the pressures on housing stability very early on. But, back to Mike's question and why you're gathered today, and to check in on where we're at and what we anticipate. I would love to be able to give you some really clear numbers and some assumptions. We have tried to do that. We've got a couple of models that, unfortunately, I apologize, I haven't been able to pull together in more of a presentation format. But I can say that we're no longer, we talk about it internally, we're no longer in an environment of planning. Because things are changing so much all the time. It's really about scenarios and trying to be positioned to respond to those scenarios and whatever may happen, and to do that quickly. Amongst the things that we've anticipated includes, there's really kind of a few big baskets. The concerns that we've had around evictions, and trying to anticipate what impact that might have, and where our best indicators will be. The challenges that we have in that is that certainly there will be those individuals that, even though they have arrears potentially, they aren't able to negotiate their situation so that they don't either get evicted, or they're walking away from a circumstance and trying to get another apartment. What we see when the housing environment changes so much is we also see people either moving up in the market or down in the market. So there's a lot of change. But it's very difficult to anticipate what that will mean to homelessness and how many people might be impacted. We have individuals that have been relying on CERB payments, and the horizon for that program and the transition from that program, if they qualify to an income support program, is going to be, it's a concern just in terms of the smooth transition generally of different programs from different orders of government. And also we know that some people have been receiving benefits from a couple of sources. I think there's been a lot of effort to try to not have that accrue and become a big liability, but we know that people receive funding from CERB that maybe they weren't entitled to, and may have those resources clawed back, if you will. I know that that's not a great term, but when you have no money and barely enough to live on, having a debt with your income source is extremely difficult to work your way out of. So that's another anticipated challenge. And finally, we're in a second wave. I mean, we're all wondering if there's another shoe that's going to drop, I think, because we've seen numbers increase, and we see our loved ones and our colleagues affected over the last several months. We're starting. I would suggest that it's becoming closer to home for many of us, and some people who've been able to rely on some of their social and family network for support. We saw very early on that individuals who maybe were underhoused, sharing apartments, sharing the couch sleeping, the provisionally housed as we would call it, become immediately homeless because the people that have been hosting them or accommodating them are needing to isolate. And those circumstances change so quickly, and again, really, really challenging to predict. So I've outlined some really big contributing factors to housing risk and inflow into homelessness. We have increased our efforts around prevention and diversion to ensure that anybody that does experience homelessness in this circumstance gets connected to the resources that are available to them as quickly as possible. We know the best predictor of homelessness is past experiences of homelessness, so the quicker we're able to respond as a community to those situations, the more we can prevent people from what becomes very much more difficult and challenging to address is really long-term experiences of homelessness. So we've been putting more of our effort into that, trying very, very hard to not divert away from our continued housing focus and housing chronic people that have experienced homelessness as a chronic, so that's just in terms of the length of time, but also complexity, in terms of health, mental health and addictions issues that have challenged them and been a contributing factor to their experience of homelessness. So we've continued to prioritize as we have in our community. That prioritization has been absolutely critical to the fact that we had until, prior to the pandemic and a year ago today, we were confidently talking about almost, cutting our homeless numbers in our community by half. Our by name list, which is the registry that we rely on to give us the truest picture possible, recognizing that everything's going to have its challenges in terms of registries and lists and counts and all of those things. But we were in like a 1,500 person range, recognizing that people are coming into homelessness and then we're housing, and we were still experiencing people coming into homelessness, but we were housing at a faster rate. And since the pandemic, there's been an increase in those coming into homelessness, and therefore we are now looking at about 1,900 to 2,000 people on our by names list from the same time last year. So very sadly, it's the first time in our community since we initiated our commitment to end homelessness in 2009 that we've actually seen an increase. We've had year over year really reliable data, whether you're looking at shelter utilization and the number of people in shelters, individuals that have been relying on short-term accommodations, and certainly our by name list and our homeless counts, they've all trended down until this year. And so that increase is really challenging. I know that one of the things that you guys want to talk about today is just really how do we support people in not becoming homeless in the first place, and what those pressures are. And I'm here to, if there's questions, as I said, I would be, I don't want to be alarming, but I also have a challenge saying, what numbers we anticipate in terms of that growth. But at our current pace, and then looking at the fact that some people will experience homelessness and they may not even hit our radar, just in terms of the way that we conduct our by name list and do outreach and connect with people, that it's a significant risk to our community. And whether, if I was to pick a 5,000 person number, a 10,000 person number, or a 1,000 person number, what I know amongst all of those situations is that it will be significantly more than we have the resources and the support for. So very interested in the discussion today about how the interfaith community can support individuals. I have some angst, I will signal a little bit. For those that were really kind of familiar and engaged in this work back in 2008, 2009, very early in our plan's experience, there was something called the HEP Fund, the Homeless Eviction Prevention Fund from the provincial government, which they, I think it was only in existence for 2.5, 3 years, and it went from $6 million to $60 million very quickly, largely out of a design issue in terms of not targeting necessarily sufficiently, and also underestimating the number of people that were just really needing support. And that's the kind of challenge that we're faced. So when we think about mitigating evictions and helping people in that time, we've got a number of agencies that have become we're really focused on that prevention and diversion space, recognizing that part of what is really important is to be rigorous about that. And when we talk about diversion, it's really actually rarely, it's never solely about money in terms of providing resources. A lot of times it's doing the heavy lifting and really just connecting people to whatever other resources they have, because otherwise we may find ourselves really unable to meet the demands. So just throwing that out there as part of the context and our experience and our learnings over the last 15 years. And we have to rely on all of those tools in our toolbox when we sit in a situation that none of us ever thought we'd be in the middle of a pandemic and still working diligently to end homelessness. I hope that is a good overview and introduction, Mike. I don't know if you wanted to kind of yourself channel some of the questions that you may have from discussions earlier today that you would like me to expand on. I, again, unfortunately missed the first hour of your day, so there may be some specific things you'd like me to expand on.
So I would say, so one of the things that we are really grateful that, we were really grateful for Homeward Trust giving us a presentation talking about this over the course of the summer, and that there could be a potential surge in folks that are losing their housing, especially as CURB funding changes, ends, all of that kind of thing. One of the ideas we began talking about, knowing that fundraising is not one of our strengths, it is, even finding our own budget is a challenge. But we wondered if it might be timely for us as a movement to back a major, and to work with a few partners to begin a major rent assistance fundraiser, whether it's to reactivate some of the programming that, like I know Capital Region Housing ran their rent assistance program with the provincial funds that were available to them, and maybe if we could try a citywide push to raise 50 to 100 million. You gotta aim big, right? Because that's the need. But that might be valuable. Certainly we could talk with the province about partnering with them on that even, it might be something we could bring to the table. I know I participated in a faith leader consultation with the Premier just a couple days ago, and so I did broach the question of rent assistance and the fact that we as faith communities get people coming to us and asking for help all the time with, I can't pay the rent this month, and but it's a regular month-to-month stuff. And so he said that they were really, the different orders of government are really working hard to, they're collaborating on making sure that if CURB funding changes, that what follows will be sufficient. And so that's sort of what he was able to say at that point. But do you think there would be some value in us showing leadership on the rent assistance? We can talk to local foundations that we have a relationship with to see if they would participate, and we're good at getting partners to the table. That's one of our strengths.
So I guess a couple of layers of maybe some feedback and advice that I might offer, and I will first say that I appreciate and honestly empathize, like all the orders of government, including our city government, have been hit extremely hard with the tax base and additional expenses, and the deficits are really significant. And what I'm certainly finding, and I think we are all finding, is that we are making a lot of short-term important decisions, but there's generally a fear with governments of institutionalizing a program that then becomes permanent. And just like our additional federal money that was just announced this week, which will provide a really significant lift and confidence to our ability to plan for some potential hotel purchases and repurposing buildings, as well as more pandemic funding, it is still just to the end of March next year. So, there's kind of like that. Just bearing that in mind, that in this environment, that's certainly something we need to acknowledge when we start to think about new initiatives and what's government-led and what can be community-led, and just, the wariness, I think, of government to become kind of involved in things that become very permanent when they were intended to be temporary. The other thing you mentioned, partnerships, and I would really underscore that as what has been an important part of our learning, and I would direct maybe some of our future planning, and maybe it's a bit of workshopping. This is something that Gary has brought up with me as well, is just that supportive referral space, although it's not a perfect program. I think building on the strengths of frontline partners who take responsibility for some of the due diligence around approvals and supporting individuals, because that is a ton of not just work. I mean, we're all willing to do really hard work. I'm not, none of us are afraid of that. But it's a huge responsibility, and again, when we are also limited in our resources, we really want to make sure that we're designing a response and that is going to those that really need it. And the partnerships that we've established through supportive referrals, it is something I think the Interfaith community could really specifically build off of. I think we could provide more detailed information that you could look at, and you and your other colleagues could look at in terms of really intentionally, if you're going to put that level of effort into a fundraising campaign, having confidence that you've got the framework for ensuring that it is both broad enough, because if you kind of pick one channel, there's likely, we all worry about that right now. There are people that no matter what we've done, and Homer Trust and all of our partners have worked on, are being missed, because we can only throw our net so far. So the nice thing about a supportive referral program is that it can engage a lot of different parts of our community. But I think I would offer that having a way of having some due diligence on the front end without being overly bureaucratic is a worthy goal, because otherwise you will find that you may raise a lot of money, and those are big ambitious goals for sure, 150 million, and it's not that it's not possible, but you may find also that it doesn't have the impact if it's not really clearly directed. And anything we can do to help with that, again, this is based on, we're all learning. I think the experience that we've had with the supported referrals is that there's an education piece to it, and that might be something that as you think about resourcing and supporting those partnerships that we might be able to help with. Really being clear when an organization is working with a family or individuals who are at risk of losing their housing, helping them understand how to really respond to that quickly. Diversion training was something that was in our plan, and we'd actually started working on last fall to really support that. It's not about just trying to find out $300 or $500. That there's a way of engaging in the conversation to help people understand the system, but also rely perhaps on some of the resources that they didn't even know they had. So that kind of work, we started it. Honestly, we've become very, very distracted, as most of us have, with a completely, constantly changing environment. But there's some really good foundational work there, really good foundational work, and I would, kind of offer that would be where I would maybe. I know you guys will talk. There's lots of other pressures. There's lots of other pressures on the faith community to be there for people during this time. This is one space.
Thank you for that. I think the wisdom in choosing our partners is we would not be administrating, we would want to find some sensible guidelines, and not everybody needs it too. Maybe it would be geared towards large families. To stabilize large families, because they don't have the option of sharing a house with another family. It's just not a possibility. But thank you thank you very much for your presentation and for the work that you do. I think the glimpse too that you've given us of how difficult it is to do real long-term planning when so much is changing so fast on a daily basis. And
yeah, but you know, I have to say also, and I know that there's some partners in the room, I'm fortunate to be able to be plugged in as Homer Trust to some of the national conversations and other communities, and through this whole process I've been extremely impressed with how our community keeps working together. None of it, again, being easy, but you know, I think we've been really, really resilient, and that's because of the way that we've learned to work over a period of time. And I really appreciate everybody's efforts in that regard.
okay, thank you very much. All right, take care, Susan. Okay, our Jeremiah from the Mustard Seed, we've asked him to share a few words as well for us about some of what he's seen taking place on the street. I know Susan probably covered some of your material, but if you'd like to add a few things, you're welcome to do that.
Hi everybody.
Hello.
Hello everybody. Good to see you all. So honored to be here. First off, I'd like to say thank you to the ladies in the back for the delicious meal.
Yes.
Very, very delicious. My language must her up. Delicious. I could have a few more, but don't give me more, okay? So honored to be here for Interfaith Housing Initiative. Thank you so much, Mr. Mike, Pastor Mike, for having me. Thank you so much for everybody for coming. I work for the Mustard Seed. I'm going to keep my mask on if that's okay. If you can't hear me, raise your hand if I'm mumbling too much. I'll try to talk slowly, but not too slowly because we're running out of time. But I work for the Mustard Seed, and we help people living in poverty and homelessness. And Pastor Mike just wanted me to share a few things of the things we did during the summertime, as well as the challenges in the future. And I'm going to look at just 3 simple things: collaboration, cases, as in COVID cases, the community, need for community, and finally just a summary of the challenges we face in regards to our community. First off, as Mrs. McGee mentioned, we have seen great collaboration between agencies. I myself worked at the Expo Center this summertime, and it was a beautiful picture where agencies could come together, as well as agencies plus peace officers and security guards and our community, kind of living in the same home, as well as it was a cool place where people of other faiths could come together. I had great conversations with many of my Muslim brothers and sisters I was working with, people in the Hindu faith, and we had a smudge every day. It was a beautiful picture of that. And also our community was cared for. The challenge with it, though, was it wasn't sustainable. As Pastor Mike mentioned earlier, the funding was already kind of suspect for housing, and then the expo cost a few million a month to run. And the long term, it just couldn't be done the way it was done. And now we've seen kind of going back to kind of separation of the agencies. The drop-ins are still kind of, not all, but some are open for our community, including the Mustard Seed. We have in the West End the Christian Care Center, and on the South Side the Neighbor Center. And we are seeing, unfortunately, as Mrs. McGee was saying, increased numbers and new people we've never ever seen before. Second part I'll quickly talk about is cases. By God's grace, there was no cases of COVID in the homeless community until about 2 weeks ago. And I'm very, very thankful for that. I think that's a testament to what has been done, but unfortunately now things have changed, and as you might have heard, there has been an outbreak in one of the shelters. And this is really hard to hear for us. We're worried, as Mrs. McGee was saying, so we do cover your prayers. And as you might know, there is right now a secret isolation area for those who are experiencing homelessness to go to. And in the future, the hope is there are going to be 2 isolation areas in which people who are symptomatic and positive go, and another place where it's asymptomatic or not positive. There's going to be a distinction between there in the future. And in response to this, the Mustard Seed is opening a large day shelter. That's from the provincial government and other funding. But 130 people can stay there in the south side of Edmonton. Right now we have 2 Strathcona as well as the Trinity Lutheran, but now we're moving it all to one larger area, and that'll be open in a couple, hopefully a month or so. And that's the idea right now, is other agencies opening up smaller day shelters across the city. And the next one is community. One thing we've noticed is we can give people homes or give people a place to hang out, but the need for community is so great. And we're really hoping to support our community who have homes, as well as if we do have day shelters, to include recreation, community events, cultural opportunities, where they can still feel a sense of home. And let me end this with a few things. We talked about the challenges already. A number of cases we're a bit worried about, so we appreciate your prayers. Sense of community, we're really trying to work that out. And also sustainability, trying to make sure that what we do is not just for a few months, but is able to keep going. And one last thing is what I'm passionate about is, unfortunately, there's increased fear of our community. Even before there was cases of COVID, our community was blamed for the pandemic by regular citizens of Edmonton. One of my friends said he was on the bus, and a mother and her daughter was looking at him, and the woman told her daughter, "Look at that homeless person. He's the reason the COVID is so bad in Edmonton." And I am worried that now that there is cases, that fear will amplify. So we'll need to be agents of peace in people's hearts and minds, to let them know that no, they're not the problem, that they're not the enemy, but we all in Edmonton need to work together to fight this together. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it, and we appreciate all the work you're doing here. Thank you.
All right, for the last little bit of our time, we're going to have some, just have some time to talk together. And so if you can maybe get together with a few folks at your table, we're going to have, we've got about 15 people that have tuned in on us via online connection as well. And so they'll have breakout rooms too. There's a few small questions that are there on your agenda. Okay, and so those 4 questions are, and these are open-ended questions that you can talk as you wish about. It's just meant to help you start talking. Okay, so what needs are you seeing unfold? How is your community trying to respond? And can your table highlight anything that we should dig into more as a movement? And how can we have this conversation in our faith communities? So we got about 15 minutes that we'll spend talking at tables, and to talk about what you've heard, what you've seen.